another recipe with you, and it's the homemade English toffee. Very good. My family loves it. I love it. Yummy, yummy. So here's looking at what you're going to need to make that. So the first thing is you want 1 pound of salted butter. So it's actually 4 sticks. Make sure it's the salted butter. I just get a generic, great, whichever one is the cheapest. So, because it is kind of expensive. And then you're going to need 2.5 cups of the granulated sugar. You need 2 cups of chopped walnuts. Now these are not chopped. I bought just the big bag at Sam's Club, and so I just go ahead and chop them up, but I want 2 cups of that. Here's one thing that's a little bit different for most people. I love using the bark chocolate, and so rather than using 16 ounces of chocolate chips, I use 16 ounces of the bark chocolate, and so that's actually 8 squares. They already come in little squares, so that's 8 squares of the bark chocolate. And then 4 tablespoons of the corn syrup. I just use light corn syrup, and 1 cup of water. All right, so the next thing you want to do is go ahead and get a baking sheet. This one is a 16 by 12. Now you could go with the smaller one, but you want to be careful. You want to be able to spread that toffee out, because if you make it too thick, it's really bad on your teeth and you might break one. So go ahead and get a baking sheet, and you just spray it with some cooking spray. And then I have my 2 cups of nuts. Now, if you're chopping the nuts up by hand, I recommend doing it the night before you're actually going to make your candy, so that you're not bogged down with that. Anyways, 2 cups, and I'm just going to go ahead and spread them out on my cookie sheet. Okay, and just make sure that that's kind of spread out evenly. And then I'm just going to set that to the side. All right, so I went ahead and I cut up my bark chocolate. Now, as I said, they come in little squares, and so it's just easier to go ahead and cut them up rather than keeping one big piece, so that when I stick it in the microwave, it will make it easier to melt. I need 16 ounces, and each one of the squares are 2 ounces, so I just need 8 of these. Okay, so I have my 16 ounces of bark chocolate, and I'm just going to set it aside. So there's a few things you want to make sure that you really have before you start making candy. And one thing is a heavy pot. This is a pot I've had for quite a while now, and it's an 8-quart pot, and it's a little probably too big for what I'm making today, but it just has a really good base to it, really good foundation, so I really love using this pot. The other thing, I've had several candy thermometers, and I don't do too well with them. I somehow end up cracking them. I don't even know how I do it. So I've relied on just my Taylor thermometer. So this one is just a digital thermometer, and it works really great. So I use this. And then the other thing is making sure that you have a good spoon. Actually, it doesn't have to be a good spoon. It just has to be a spoon that's not going to melt. And so I've relied on my wooden spoon. So that's just some basic tools to always have before you start making your candy. So I'm going to go ahead and get started now, and I'm going to start by putting my 2.5 cups of sugar. I want to go ahead and put my pound of butter, which again is just all 4 sticks. All right, so I have all 4 sticks of my butter in there. The great thing about this recipe is a lot of times you have to pull the butter out, set the butter out to soften, so you don't with this one. So I've got my 4 sticks of butter in there, my 2.5 cups of sugar. I need my 1 cup of water, and then I'm going to need 4 tablespoons of my corn syrup. Okay, now that I have my 4 tablespoons of corn syrup in there, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on to medium heat and get it boiling. All right, so I have it cooking now. I want to go ahead and bring this to a boil. I don't have to worry about it for the first couple minutes, but then I'm going to go ahead and stir constantly until the temperature gets up to 290. So it's been about 8 minutes now, and you can see that the butter is still melting. That's one thing about, first of all, I have an electric stove, and second, the pot is so thick it does take a little bit longer to get started. I'm just going to give one quick stir here and let the butter continue melting. Okay, so 10 minutes in, I'm getting a really pretty good boil now. The one thing about candy making is it's not hard, you just definitely have to have patience, because it does take some time just sitting here stirring. So put on some good music, just kind of enjoy yourself, have a cup of coffee, whatever it takes to get that candy done, because in the end it is just so yummy. Once you get that boil going, you definitely want to be stirring constantly. So I'm going to go ahead and take the temperature now to see where we're at. Remember, I want the 290. All right, and we're only at about 221. And I know it feels like I've been stirring forever, but that's just the way candy works. Once it gets to this strong boil, it will start to go a little bit quicker, but it still has a way to go. At about 235 degrees, that's the soft ball stage, it will start about, the bubbling will calm down a little bit, and you'll definitely start smelling it a lot more. Okay, so, but that's still really only about 235 degrees, so it still has a ways to go. So just keep stirring. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take the temperature one more time. This has been about 23 minutes of boiling time. The last couple minutes, it really starts to move. So I'm going to go ahead and go to that crackle. I'm at 285 right now and 287. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off and get ready to pour. All right. So this is where it's really helpful to have somebody, an extra pair of hands. My husband's going to go ahead and pour. This is just because it's a little bit heavy and I want to make sure that we're spreading it evenly. I like to have him do this part. Okay, so he's just going to pour it over the nuts, and then we'll go ahead and try and spread it out a little bit, making sure that we get every last drop out. Okay, and then I'm going to quickly just spread it with a spatula. Just kind of a pool what's still really thick on top, because of course the nuts will move, but you don't want it too thick again, because you don't want to break your teeth. That looks a little thick over here on the end. Just keep pulling. It is still wet, so it's still movable. May not get some of those nuts at the end there. All right, so that's about as good as I'm going to get it spread. So I'm going to go ahead and let that sit for a little bit, and I'm going to melt the chocolate in the microwave now. But if you were using chocolate chips, this is where you would want to go ahead and sprinkle the chocolate chips on there quickly so that the chocolate chips could actually melt on here. But I don't have to worry about that because I'm going to melt my chocolate in the microwave. All right, so I've melted my chocolate. I'm just going to go ahead and pour it on here now and then spread it. My toffee is still hot, so it should keep the chocolate warm and allow me to spread it for a little bit here. Go ahead and scrape the rest of that out. And I'm going back to my spatula, which I didn't even have to wash because of the toffee, and then just spread that all the way. Ooh, yummy. Now I'm really happy with the size of this pan because it did make the toffee it looks like a lot thinner than the last time I made it. I'm not so happy with putting the nuts too close to the end there that I just am wasting. So sad. But we'll kind of chocolate coat them and make those yummy too. Okay, this chocolate is still pretty thick, so I probably could have gotten away with a little bit less. I was actually considering a little bit more. But now I'm just going to go ahead and set it aside and let it cool. I want to be careful and make sure that I don't have some chocolate that is really thick in some areas and thin in the other. Okay, so now I'm just going to set it aside and let it cool. All right, so one of the biggest problems, the biggest problem about making candy is waiting for it to be ready. So after I set it aside and let it cool, it took about 2 hours. One thing that we did to help try to cool it off is we put it on top of a pan so that the bottom could kind of cool. And then that took about 2 hours and 15 minutes. And then we were so impatient, we went ahead and stuck it in the refrigerator. And that was for like another 45 minutes. So be patient, it will get done. You need that chocolate to harden up. All right, so I have this big slab of English toffee. I'm ready to break it up. Now I want to try something. I've not tried this before, and what I want to do is I want to go ahead and score the middle part of it so that I can hopefully bend it over and break it a little bit easier. So let's see if that'll work. All right, so I went ahead and just kind of pushed down a little bit all the way to the center, kind of cracked the candy a little bit so I can start lifting it up, because you can see it's just kind of stuck down in there. But if you see, I've already kind of separated it a little bit there, so that makes it a little bit easier to break it up. I'm going to go ahead and try and lift this part up here. I have a little spatula, but I don't actually need it. Okay, so since that worked so good, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, rather than, I could try it, just try breaking these little pieces up, and that actually works pretty good. Okay, because it is a lot thinner than the last time I made it. All right, so I got it all broken up, and it's about 3.5 pounds of candy, so that's a lot of candy. You can actually put it on a plate and give it to friends, so it is super yummy. Again, it is a little bit thick, so you want to be careful, don't break a tooth. If you put it in your mouth and just let it melt, oh my goodness, so delicious. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I like making videos that are fun and that I think that you'll really enjoy, and believe me, don't be afraid to try this recipe. It's a great recipe to try. Have fun with it. Thank you.